Wait.
Just us 7 right now.
Yeah, so it's streaming to YouTube, but we haven't entered the, well, maybe we did enter the, there we go.
Welcome to Denver Startup Week. I'm Tammy Dorr, President and CEO of the Downtown Denver Partnership and co-chair of Denver Startup Week. This year marks the 10-year anniversary of Denver Startup Week. DSW has been the catalyst for lots of change over the past decade. And this week, we're coming together to celebrate the past and dream big for the future. We are able to bring Denver Startup Week to this community thanks to our 2021 sponsors. Thank you to our HQ and title sponsor, Amazon, and our title sponsors whose leadership makes this week come to life. Capital One Cafe, Downtown Denver Partnership, Fluid Truck, Hotel Engine, and WeWork. And our track sponsors who have made all of the great content you're hearing today possible, our founder track sponsor, Kickstart, growth track sponsor, Friday Health Plans, developer track sponsor, Quizlet, product track sponsor, Palantir, our designer track sponsor, Battery 621, and the Public Works, people track sponsor, Exactly, and spotlight event sponsor, Strat Labs. Our headline event sponsors are bringing the excitement to the week. Thank you to B-Side Fund, Colorado Public Radio, Comcast, Coors Brewing, Denver Pavilions, Entrepreneurship at the University of Denver, JP Morgan Chase, Method, Moss Adams, Pi Insurance, Promontory Mortgage, Path, Southwest, Tattered Cover, and VF Venture Foundry. Finally, thank you to our partner and member sponsors, all listed on the screen. Please say thank you to these companies as you enjoy our hybrid Denver Startup Week. And don't forget, use the hashtag DenStartupWeek to share your experiences and moments of inspiration on social media. Have a great week.
I'm Jimmy Eberhard. I'm the founder and CEO of Fluid Truck. Fluid Truck is growing rapidly. We're currently the fastest growing company in Colorado. We're going out there and transforming huge problems in fleets and deliveries and really providing a platform that gives anybody access to the right vehicle when they need it. Fluid's culture is a really unique one. It's a place where you get the opportunity to challenge, and I kind of look at it as like it's a choose your own adventure book. You step in, we're going to push the challenges, stuff that we're not even sure is possible, but we're going to go out there and try to build it. And it's amazing to watch people that have stepped inside of us in the last year and now coming in and building, growing, leading teams. We're a testing ground and a proving ground. It's going to build some of the next technology leaders for the next generation. I love Denver Startup Week. I love people that are out there building, creating, starting companies, taking a chance and saying, hey, I've got this idea, let's give it a go. And so just taking the challenge and going out and trying, that's what Denver Startup Week is all about. Fluid Truck is in a rapid scale mode. We've launched 27 markets this year already, and we're continuing to expand out and build across the US. For anybody that's ambitious, that's going out there and wants to change the world, come join us. We're out there building big stuff, and we need people that want to come lead, challenge, and go out there and transform the industry.
At Comcast, we believe entertainment shouldn't have to be seen.
Movies with video descriptions.
A massive dinosaur foot stomps down into the mud.
Or heard. To be experienced. That innovation can begin with the sound of your voice.
Kids movies.
We just got the eye tracking technology set up.
And that technology can unlock independence.
Wow, I did that.
At Comcast, we believe that disability isn't the lack of ability, it's the lack of a solution. Because when you strive to make products more inclusive, you help everyone get closer to what matters most.
Hi, everyone. My name is Connor Swanson. Just wanted to say a quick hello. I am a part of the organizing committee for Denver Startup Week, the developer track chair for the week as well. And also going into its 5th year now is something I've helped put together and lead called the Ambassador program, which is a really cool way to help Colorado connect with other communities. Obviously, we're not doing things normally this year, but excited to still put together some great content to help connect the Colorado ecosystem with other communities that are thinking about Colorado as a place to potentially call home from a professional perspective, from a place to start or move their company perspective, or even from a place that they might want to start investing into more frequently, or looking at it as a place in that regard as well. With that said, I'm really excited to turn it over to Adam, who's going to be leading our session today, and we'll introduce you to our panelists. Thanks everyone for being involved.
Great, thanks, Connor. Really appreciate it. Excited to be doing this. I'm Adam Burrows from Range Ventures. We're a seed fund investing in Colorado tech companies primarily, and going to talk about my favorite thing, which is the growth and the current state of the investing ecosystem here. So put together an awesome panel. We've got Jaclyn Hester from Foundry Group, Andy Jenks from Drive Capital, and Kira Noodleman from B Partners, all of whom are actively investing in Colorado. And so we got a bunch of interesting topics to dive into today. If you do have any questions throughout this, just raise your hand, put it in the Q&A, and I'll make sure that we ask our panelists whatever you want to hear. But want to kick this off by just going around. I'll go Jaclyn, you first, because you're just in the top left of my screen. Who are you? Tell me a little bit about your firm and what are you focused on investing in?
Sure, thanks for having me. Jaclyn Hester, I'm a partner at Foundry Group. We are based here in Boulder. Roughly 25% of our portfolio overall is based here in Colorado, but we invest all over the US. Our current strategy is that 25% of our capital is invested in early stage funds, typically seed funds around the country, and one in Canada. And 75% of our capital is direct investments, typically entering at Series A, sometimes later, and largely focused on working with our partner funds on companies that are sort of graduating out of their portfolios. So I work on both sides of the house. I'm sort of on the LP side, investing in seed funds, and then direct investments into mostly Series A companies. Recent investments have been Speckit, which is a Colorado, Denver-based company, another company called GigWage. I love future of work stuff. I love payments, B2B SaaS, and actually just led a consumer investment in an insurance company called Loop.
Awesome.
Great to be here, and thanks for having me.
Andy, you're next.
All right, I must be, I don't know where that is on your screen, but there I am.
Just going around the horn.
Hey everybody, Andy Jenks. I'm one of the general partners of Drive Capital. Drive is a venture fund that is focused on letting entrepreneurs grow where they're strongest. And so what does that mean? That means that we are looking for those entrepreneurs that are taking advantage or that unfair advantage of wherever they are. Oftentimes that's not in Silicon Valley. And so we tend to focus on markets that are not coastal based. However, we do invest in the coast. We're looking for the best companies in the world. And we have 3 portfolio companies in Denver, specifically Boulder, Denver. And yeah, we have about, I think we have 57 portfolio companies, and they range from Series Seed, first check size is called $1 million, up to growth stage companies where those checks can be up to $50, $60 million. So good to see everybody.
Kira.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. I'm Kira Noodleman. I'm a principal at B Partners. We're a San Francisco headquartered venture firm, but actually I moved out to Denver about a year ago. And we love to be the first check writer. So really focus on that pre-seed stage, which I think is a great fit for this local market. We focus on a lot of industries. So broadly enterprise and unconventional frontier tech. And we have a worldview that machines will win. And we don't think that's dystopian. And believe that machining is outpacing human capacity, things like speed, precision, complexity, but that humans will own instinct and purpose and flexibility and passion and so on. So geography-wise, we look at North America, so US and Canada. I think 70% of our companies are based in the Bay Area. We've got a couple already in Denver, and certainly me being out here in Denver is likely going to change that percentage. So super excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, my first question actually, Kira, is for you on that note, talking about your pandemic move from San Francisco out to Denver, and just curious what you've seen as the biggest differences that have struck you in that year between investing, being based in San Francisco versus being based here.
Yeah, that's a great question. it's funny. My story is that I came out here for a few months thinking this would be a great change of scene and already had been exploring the Denver market pre-COVID, and got here and got really excited about the local ecosystem, and personally was having a great time too, being close to the mountains. And so it turned into a permanent move. You know, how is it different? It's different in so many ways. I mean, I think I love the give first ethos that, you know, I know Brad and Foundry Group really established years ago. And for me personally and at DSW Partners, you know, we have a company building and partnership model. So that has felt really good. It feels like I'm around like-minded investors and founders that want that type of collaboration. I wouldn't say that's the same in the Bay at all. And, you know, at the pre-seed, I really had to recalibrate how I thought about, you know, deal sourcing. And, you know, I was looking at some numbers here, and I think the average seed deal, it's around $1.5 million locally. And so, you know, in the Bay, that's the average pre-seed deal. And so what I'm noticing is that maybe more of the opportunities that are really that first check and zero traction, zero revenue, all of that are more from perhaps angel groups, and some of the accelerators, of course, too. And I think, you know, it's been so cool. Something I didn't expect coming here is just the proximity to other ecosystems too, right? Like, you know, Austin, Atlanta, Park City, these are, you know, Andy kind of spoke to this, but they're currently underserved relative to coastal cities when it comes to venture capital funding. And so, you know, granted with COVID, I haven't been like hopping all around to those places on planes, but at least yet, but even just through the collaboration, I think, of these regional markets, I've been seeing a lot of opportunities that come from these places. So, you know, it's been a blast, it's been an adventure, and people have been welcoming me with open arms, and I'm so grateful.
Awesome. We're happy you're here for sure.
Thanks.
Jaclyn, the other side of that coin a little bit, Foundry Group has been around, you know, been an institution in the ecosystem and helped build the ecosystem for so long. How have you seen things evolve, right? And particularly in the past couple of years?
Yeah, so I've been in Colorado now 12 years, and it has changed a ton.
2009 was the best year to get here, right?
It's changed a ton. And I think you've just seen, I mean, you've seen so many companies either move headquarters or open up another location here for the larger companies, or buy companies here and then have a presence. So I think that there's been a big talent shift. I think talented folks like Kira want to live in a place like this. So we've seen just a lot of, you know, especially during COVID, like the amount of folks coming in from bigger cities that wanted a different lifestyle, where we still work very hard to build great companies, but we live in a beautiful place. It's a little bit more low key and values are a little bit different. So I think that we've seen just a lot of talent coming here. And then, you know, I think that we've just got a lot more credibility. And so you're seeing a lot of investors that would have never spent time in this market all of a sudden paying a lot of attention to this market. And so, you know, Adam, I know for you, I know for Matchstick, like you're getting to partner with a lot of the coastal firms and sort of be their boots on the ground. And so we're seeing both from a talent perspective, from where bigger companies want to have a location, and from a capital perspective, just a lot more focus on the area. I think we were early believers that you could build great companies anywhere. And we chose to be in Boulder for a reason. We wanted to be sort of out of the noise of the Bay Area. But I think that we think it's really important that there's connectivity between all these places and Colorado, and we're seeing that happen a lot more. So I'm super excited about what I'm seeing. I'm thrilled that we get to be here, and that we get to sort of see everything across the country, but also, you know, do a lot in our backyard. And there's more and more exciting. And I think the crazy thing for us is seeing like deals happen, get announced, and we're like, oh my God, like there's just so much happening that it's not necessarily that. I mean, I think we see a lot, but we don't necessarily see every single deal in this market anymore. And in some ways that's frustrating. And in some ways I think that's really cool.
Absolutely. Andy, you know, you've got the perspective of investing across so many different markets. Do you see anything, you know, as you look at different markets, do you guys look for different things? Are there different dynamics to Denver versus Austin versus Columbus versus other places you invest? How do you all think about that?
Yeah, I mean, what we look for is we're thematic based, right? So we're looking for themes, and there are certain themes inside of like the Denver ecosystem that are just different from the themes in other ecosystems, right? So, you know, if you're looking at healthcare, there's like, you know, Sondermind, for example, we're investors there. And if you're looking at data stuff, right? So like we're investors in Stateless on the networking side, cloud compute. Like I think people don't realize this, or maybe people do, but like way back in the day, like networking, communications, like that was all Denver, right? And so there's a lot of good infrastructure that's been built over the years that has now migrated to the cloud, obviously, but there's still those great engineering minds and those great leaders that have built those companies that have spawned other companies that are in that stuff. So I would say that what we look for is we look for things that are in theme. And so we find those themes kind of running from market to market to market. But in Denver, what we've seen, again, not Denver specifically, but like that whole kind of Front Range region, is we've started to see those markets start expanding. And so now, like, for example, Adam, I met with a company that you're an investor in, right? Like that data market is like really taking hold, like strong. Great businesses are being built there. And I would say that, you know, those industries are starting to get wider, where maybe they started more narrow, like in certain areas, they start narrow, right? And then they start fanning out as more people come and understand the benefits of being in a place like, you know, along the Front Range. And I can say that I was kind of, before I joined Drive, I was a founder in the Bay Area, lived there for almost 20 years. And my first office outside the Bay Area was actually in Boulder. And this was in 2000, it may have been 2009, as a matter of fact. And quickly it became our largest office. It was bigger than our office in the Bay Area, and it was probably our strongest performing office. And so that to me was like a really strong signal from back in the day when I was actually an operator, that, you know, this is definitely a market that has evolved. I haven't been there as long as, you know, some other people, but like at the same time, like it's a very strong market with a lot of great tech talent. Not to mention it's closer. I think that when Kira's talking about like the closeness and the proximity to other markets, that's a huge network effect. That when I was living in San Francisco, I actually know Michael Barrelsheimer really well, by the way. When I was living in San Francisco, I thought that was the center of the universe, which it was at the time, but my kids would always be like, it's so far to get everywhere. And when you're in a place like Denver, like Austin is like right there, Minneapolis right there, Chicago right there, you know, that's a 4-hour flight, you know, from Chicago to San Francisco, right? So these markets are a lot tighter and they're more tied together. Our talent partner who's based in Denver, she covers, you know, Kansas City, St. Louis, Chicago, Austin, all from Denver. So these markets are pretty tightly tied.
And you want to piggyback on one thing that you said. Do you see, you talked about certain clusters of competency, right, and experience in different industries. Something we get asked about a lot too is, where do you see Denver going in terms of, does Denver, you know, become the market that gets known for healthcare or for data, or are we a generalist market like a San Francisco where there's kind of all of the above? Do you have any you know, thoughts on where you see that headed? And then just would ask Jaclyn and Kira the same thing.
I do not want to be the one who pigeonholes Denver into a specific vertical, but I can tell you that the themes I'm interested in, I find it to be unbelievably strong in data and the infrastructure space, like really, really strong. And then if you look kind of just one level adjacent from that, like data powering healthcare. And so, you know, that's a great example with Sondermine, for example, right? So like data powering healthcare, data powering other things. It really starts there for me, at least. I can't speak for everybody. But I would say that competency on the infrastructure, and then the way that infrastructure supports data and builds, like stateless is a new networking paradigm, right? So like when it builds for that data, that's where I've seen it be very, very strong. I can't speak to, you know, is it going to be more generalist or not? I'd like to think so. But at least what I'm looking for, I'm finding a lot of it where I can come have a meeting in Denver and fill my calendar for a week easy.
Oh, go ahead, Jaclyn.
Oh, not a ton to add. I think we'll probably be pretty generalist. If you just think, I would just think about people and sort of the mixed bag of folks. You know, it's like sort of a unicorn for Colorado is finding somebody that actually grew up here. And so like everyone just, you know, I think there was some crazy stat a couple of years ago. It was like 1,000 people a week moving to Denver, right? So I think that because of what you're seeing in the talent space, I mean, it is a lot of enterprise. I think there's a good amount in security, a good amount in data and AI, a lot of dev tool type stuff. But I think I think we will see that sort of it follows the talent, and we get such a mixed bag here of folks that are just attracted to living in Colorado that I think we will continue to be relatively generalist. And then like, what does location actually mean anymore? And so companies are often remote and distributed. So how do you even define like what's here or not? Is sort of interesting, because even our companies that are based here are starting to hire folks in other places. I'm sure that y'all are seeing that too. So I agree. I don't think we should pigeonhole Denver into any one place.
Agreed with all of those sentiments. I guess an area that I would add that I'm seeing companies come out of is just some of the professors in the local universities lately from CU Boulder. So, you know, we look at deep tech. So we think of these labs as kind of engines of innovation, these hubs. And so I've really been spending time trying to get to know that ecosystem better. And that's been a ton of fun. And I've seen an overwhelming amount of enterprise SaaS, which is one of the areas we'll focus on. So, you know, marketplaces in particular. So yeah, it's fun. It's a liberal ESG focused market. And it doesn't, to me, feel like it's known for one thing. And I guess also it's, you know, it's a $2 billion a year market, right? So it's smaller. It makes sense that it's a mixed bag.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's what we see too. And it's one of the things we like about this market, I think, versus some others, is the diversity. It's driven by, I think, as Jaclyn, you said, a lot of the companies that have set up offices here. And I think what we'll see from our take is, like, we'll see which gigantic winners emerge, right? Because what's going to happen is people are going to spin out of those companies and create kind of a tentpole effect here. And so TBD what those end up being, I think, but we've got a lot of potential ones that are up and coming for sure. So that's super exciting. Curious about the attitude of folks here. I had sent around to this group. There was an article in Axios earlier this week talking about Denver founders having a chip on their shoulder versus the Bay Area. There was some interesting reaction all over LinkedIn and Twitter to that one. But curious to get your takes on what you've seen. Is that summarize what you've seen in the ecosystem or something different?
I just think it's so silly. I try to ignore all that stuff. I think like year after year, we get the like, Denver is the new hot hub for startups. And it's like, we've been building startup companies in Colorado for a really long time. So I tend to just roll my eyes at some of that noise. I think most founders have a chip on their shoulder. You sort of have to do the job. So sure, I think it's great if Denver founders have an extra chip on their shoulder because, you know, they're not in the Bay Area. But I sort of just laugh at all of that.
You know, I don't feel like there's a chip on people's shoulders here from either a founder or VC perspective. I do feel like there's a lot of pride to being out here, and it's almost like this, not intended to be like well-kept secret, but it's almost like people don't quite understand all the benefits of this ecosystem until you kind of learn a little bit more. And, you know, like, I think if Denver feels like it has something to prove, I mean, it's a smaller market just inherently. So I feel like it's like apples to oranges if you were to think of it from that perspective compared to say the Bay. But like, you know, at least from my perspective, coming from, you know, I think San Francisco has $60 billion in venture activity a year, 20% of all the deals, right? So it's a really developed ecosystem, and Denver's certainly emerging. And that was part of why I came. It's got 250% like year over year growth, right? It's wild here, but just like as a frame of reference, you know, Techstars is great. There's some great programs out in Boulder and so on, but you know, UC Berkeley alone has 50 entrepreneurship programs. So I just think it's like very differently structured. And I think Jaclyn spoke to this before, where I think there used to be a perception that there wasn't quite the same exits and, you know, unicorns weren't necessarily possible, but I think there's a lot of examples that people are starting to catch on to and get excited.
Yeah, we've had some, I have it down somewhere, but something like 8 or 9 new unicorns this year, right? And we had put this together when we were raising Range. I think up until by the time when we started raising in 2020, there had only been like 5 or 6 up to that point, and now there's been something like 10 since then, right? And just you look at the late stage activity, Series D, Series C, Series B companies. You know, I think that's just going to go up and to the right. So it's really great to see some of the haters start to get proved wrong on what Denver can produce.
Totally.
Yeah, Andy, have you seen that, like that dynamic similar differently in some of these other ecosystems that have been a little bit under the radar for a long time in terms of how founders, you know, think about things?
No, I mean, one thing, I mean, that I'm kind of like with Jaclyn, like, stuff is so silly. But one thing I will say is, like, I actually like entrepreneurs to have a chip on their shoulder, right? Like you got to be crazy to go start a company. Like the stats are kind of against you, right? And you got to have this like narrative that says that like, no, I'm going to be the one, we're going to be the ones that go out and like kind of change the world. So I think that what I find common across, kind of common across great entrepreneurs, it doesn't matter where they are, is they do have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. It's not an arrogance. It's just like, hey, like we're trying to do something that's never been done before, and screw you for telling me that I can't do it. I'm going to go do it. When it comes to, specifically like these, I would call them kind of outside of the Bay Area, so to speak, or even coasts, quite frankly. It's really interesting because what I've found is there's the chip on the shoulder of I'm trying to do something that's never been done before, but the openness to collaborate, right? So there's more of an openness to collaborate on getting to that next step on, even if you for example, like if you pass on a company, you have a really wonderful conversation with that founder that is a collaborative conversation. And I've gotten emails specifically from a guy in Denver, and he was like, I still think back to that conversation that we had and the intellectual kind of back and forth that we had. He's like, I still disagree with you, but I still think about, that conversation. And like, that's just not something that I found. Like when I was living in the Bay Area, I was both an angel investor and an entrepreneur. And you just have people that just say like, this is it, right? Like you're lucky if you let me, if I let you, engage with my business. This is much more collaborative, open. There is that chip on the shoulder. Don't get me wrong. Like there's still badass founders that are going to go take over the world, but it's just a lot more collaborative. And that, I don't know if that exactly answers your question, but like, that's what I've found at least.
Yeah. Just curious, we see that too. People genuinely rooting for each other, right? Wanting to, when someone else gets pressed because they've, built a unicorn company, it's not like, oh man, they just took my spotlight. It's really, I think people genuinely saying, hey, this is great. This shines more light actually on what I'm doing. And it's not a zero-sum game. Like it, I think it is in the Bay Area right now. Question is,
I mean, really quickly though, Adam, like on that point, like I moved to San Francisco in 1998, right? And like, when you think back to Web 1.0 or whatever you want to call it, like the days when Yahoo ruled the world, it was one of these, what you just described. It was like my success does not equal your failure, right? And I feel like that's how great ecosystems get built. And I feel like what we find is these great companies that are built, whether we're investors or not, irrelevant. The point is like they're getting built, and we want to make sure that we're supporting those companies, whether we're investors or not, because the next great company is going to come out of that company, right?
Absolutely. And then the question, Andy, that begs is, once Denver gets to the size, right, as an ecosystem of where the Bay Area is, can we keep the good parts and not let things get to that level? And I think the give first, ethos is awesome to underlie all of this, and hopefully can prevail. I'm optimistic that it can.
Yeah, I hope so. And I think there's like a certain type of person that's attracted to this place. There's sort of a pioneering aspect to Colorado. There's like all the crazy people that do all the crazy outdoor things that people usually figure like would not be possible. We got a lot of that spirit here, which I like. But I think the camaraderie is real. I mean, interestingly, like sort of if you're like the history nerd on startup communities, if you look at just like what happened in the Bay Area versus Boston, and how closed system Boston was and how sharp elbowed it was in the early days versus the like, let's build things in garages and collaborate and help each other. And, that helped Bay Area, but I think it's now gotten past that, right? Where it is a lot more sharp elbowed. So I wonder if Denver will end up there as we grow, but we are like, as much as I roll my eyes at the articles that are like, oh, Denver's all of a sudden a big market. It's still really early. Like, even if you just think about the landscape and the growth that there is to be had from a real estate perspective between the Boulder and Denver market, and just like people coming here and building things, like I just think we're still in very early days, just from if you look at what the city is. So I think there's a ways to go, and I hope that we will continue to be like a great tight-knit startup community where people root for each other, because something good for one company is great. Like it continues to put other companies on the map. LA is sort of similar. And I've enjoyed spending time with the startup community in LA and the investor community in LA, because I think it's still, they're sort of similar to us, where it is still pretty collaborative.
Great. And they're a little, I mean, LA is a little bit beyond where we are, but hopefully we can take some lessons.
Certainly from a city perspective. Yeah. So it's interesting.
Absolutely. How they dealt with housing challenges. That's another conversation, I think, that we're going to have to wrestle with here as well. What have you guys seen, in the market lately, right? So lots been documented. We've seen this. I think everybody we've talked to, things have just been moving faster. Deals, valuations have increased. Things have been more competitive. What have you been seeing on the ground here? And is that similar or different to what you've been seeing in other markets?
I would say both. I think it's definitely still worse in the Bay Area than it is here, but I don't think it's all that different. And I think that there's, in general, for better or worse, this like flight to quality, focus on pedigree. And so for anything that has those qualities where you see the bigger players, the Insights, the Tigers, the Coaches of the world coming in and playing in our world, I think there are still lots of opportunities to find things that will never be on their radar. And so I think that's an advantage that we have in markets like this. But I think for the stuff that sort of checks the boxes that they're looking for, it doesn't necessarily have to be just in the Bay Area. And I think there's plenty of companies getting targeted for those types of rounds here.
Yeah, I mean, I guess because it's cool being in Denver and obviously remote work, where I certainly tapped into my Bay Area network as well. And I think deals feel like they're moving just as fast here as they might in the Bay. And I don't know, I mean, you might need to make a decision within a week. And we used to say we do 6 weeks of diligence. And certainly that has helped us just really focus on areas we know well. But, because when you talk about the Tigers and the Coaches, there's these massive rounds. I mean, one of our companies, it was 3 months after their A, they raised a B with one of these guys. What it's doing is just increasing, it's just all trickling downstream. And so we're seeing, we do pre-seed and seed. We're seeing much larger, 6 million seeds. I would have told you before that was 4 million seed would have been the cap or the ceiling. So just a lot bigger round sizes, which translates to bigger valuations. And, we've always been pre-seed first. So we're really trying to focus there. But I actually think the market is putting a lot of pressure on founders, because if you're raising more money, you have a bigger expectation of what you're going to get done in those next 2 years. And so, I think for an experienced entrepreneur, maybe that can feel really good, but for the first timers, that's pretty problematic. And one other comment about the Bay versus here, I do think valuations are a lot more inflated out there than they are here. And I was just catching up with some friends this week to validate that. And they were echoing that. So locally. So, I see that as a positive. I think Denver still has better prices.
Yeah, I think, what we've seen actually, it kind of echoes, Jaclyn, what you mentioned, where there's this little bit of a bifurcation in the market, where if somebody checks all the boxes, the conventional boxes, right, repeat founder or certain pedigree that Bay Area funds are looking for, there's no difference, right? But then you've got the other chunk of the market, which I think represents the majority, actually, of vast majority of founders, where the Bay Area folks are just not digging as deep. And I think then, Kira, what we're seeing there is still a little bit of a valuation gap between the Bay Area and here. Andy, what are you seeing? I mean, you see a bunch of different markets.
Yeah. And we look, we overpay all the time.
It's not overpaying if it's going to be a winner.
Exactly. No, we fall into the trap too. But, at the end of the day, some of the things though, valuations obviously are up, but some of the things that I always talk to entrepreneurs about, and this happens, where it doesn't matter if it's Denver or Toronto or Austin, Columbus, even, quite frankly, it doesn't really matter, or Chicago, where you are, if you're ticking the boxes and the pedigree and all that stuff. What we've found is when you start talking to founders and entrepreneurs that take these rounds from folks that have never been to visit them, they've never been on the ground, they've never smelled the same air, they've never drank from the same water fountain or coffee pot as the entrepreneur that they just invested in. How do you think those board meetings are going to go? How do you think growing a company when you need help is going to go when you've got, Foundry, Range, be on the ground in Denver? Even if you're competing on a seed deal, seed prices are obviously up. When that entrepreneur needs help, when they need to close a candidate and they're like, hey, I got this killer candidate. We're going out to dinner tonight. Can you just swing by for a drink to say hi and tell them why you love the business, right? Like that can't be done over a Zoom call. I mean, it can be, but it's not the same. And so what we've found is it's getting way more competitive on the early side. What was it? It was the $500 million seed fund, right? By Greylock just announced, where their seed deals are going to be 20 million bucks a piece. It's like, wait, what? Timeout. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with those guys or that's the wrong strategy. That's their strategy. But they, when you talk to the entrepreneurs, they are not excited about a $20 million seed deal because I think, Kira, you said it. It's like that expectation level is so high that if your seed deal is 20 million bucks, what we always think about in later stages is what did they accomplish with the paid in capital, right? So like the dollars in the dirt, where'd it go? What do we get out of it? How much revenue, how many employees, how much product, how much growth, how much whatever. And when you start thinking about that and you've got 20 million bucks on the ground, like, I don't know, man, you better have a ton of traction by the time you're out for your A or whatever is next. And it can be a trap. That's number one. And then number two, it's like really making sure that as an entrepreneur, you pick your partner. Like we tell people that all the time, like pick your partner. Check sizes are great and valuations are awesome. Don't get me wrong. But like at the end of the day, if I can have, Adam helping me close my next director of engineering, like that's way more valuable than an extra $2 million because that director of engineering is going to get you that much further in your product life cycle, right? And so we always, talk to people about, if we're competing, it's always like, are they going to be here if you need something? We show up in person to every single board meeting, even during COVID, unless they tell us we can't. Which, by the way, happened a lot during COVID. but we're telling our entrepreneurs, like, let's do in-person board meetings again if they're comfortable, obviously, all those things. But the point is, it's like, we think that there's something to be said for a lot of that stuff. And if you're a Denver, Boulder entrepreneur, like, you got to kind of pick your partner.
I think that's all totally true. I think it resonates with some founders and not others. And I think we all try to give that talk. And I think that we are in a market where some founders are like, sounds great, but I just got $100 million pre on my $1 million business, and I'm going to raise 20 million bucks and have a war chest and take 10% dilution. So I'm probably going to do that. So I think we can try all day long, but I think that some founders get it and some don't. And I don't think that necessarily one type is better than the other. But I think we all are cognizant of the fact that, like, I have empathy for that and I get why they do it. So
yeah. And we've definitely been pulled into that, by the way, where all of a sudden now we were like, we'd never go above a certain brand. Now we're back to the table and we're like, okay, here we go.
Yeah. The other thing, Adam, that we, like, nobody said was like just the ability, like what Zoom has done for the ability to have 10 conversations in a day for a founder. It's made it that, plus these bigger players coming down and offering huge checks that may or may not get taken. It's just changed the game on how we all need to think about operating our businesses to stay competitive, and just the reality of the level of competition in markets that used to be like not touched for that exact reason. You can raise from anywhere on Zoom. And you can do it fast, and you can take a ton of meetings, and you can add a bunch of FOMO. So it's, for certain types of founders, it's become a like sort of a founder's market, and the rest of us we're selling money. And so I would say it's hard out there. And I sort of like appreciate the pain, Andy, that you're probably feeling that we're going through all the time of trying to do what we know is best, but like in a game that's changed very much.
Yeah, I think it. I mean, we're all experiencing that, and I think something that is always interesting is never underestimate just how the ability to stroke a founder's ego with a high valuation. As much as we can always say what that means, and it really does mean a lot. It means higher expectations going forward for sure, because we're in an era where nobody talks about the down rounds that still happen and probably will happen at an increasing rate in the future if the market doesn't stay this hot. Founders, at the time it sounds good, right? And there's founders who are just always going to go for the highest valuation, whatever that means, with terms, partner, etc. And we'll see. Another question for you. So we have a lot of founders in the audience, I'm sure, and prospective founders. What advice, those that are in Denver, how to think about when to go raise their first round, who to talk to in this market, aside from all of us on the screen?
I mean, one way to think about your first round, which is different than any other after it, is, what can you de-risk, do with customer discovery, prove out an MVP or even a mock of one? What can you learn that's not on someone else's dime? And I think when you're ready, when you've crossed that point, and you feel like you're ready to just pour gas on and light a match, I think that's the time to raise. And, at least from a pre-seed perspective and me at B Partners, what I think about when founders are talking to me, and by the way, I think you should start conversations early. Like, I love talking to founders before they're raising. I love talking to, someone who just left that big corporate job and is thinking about a company. So I think there's a lot of people like that in this market that want to talk. So, that there's that, like, I think you just need to talk. One person will lead to another. And I can speak firsthand in the sense that when I moved here, that certainly happened. People were really inviting. And when I'm looking and it's early and that means zero traction at the pre-seed, it's really about the team and something we call problem founder fit. So kind of like, were you made to solve this problem? Would you be building this business, whether or not, we invested in you, either way. And something that I do notice in this local ecosystem is aspirations on market. That's probably the biggest difference I see from here to the Bay. And the general concept for me would be, you need to be in a market that's big enough to pivot. In fact, perhaps many times. I mean, one of our companies that later was acquired by Facebook pivoted 14 times. I'm not even kidding. So there can be a lot of frictions, and the entrepreneurship journey is a squiggly line. It's not straight. So, I mean, really, are you in a big enough market? And the way we've been talking lately is we're looking for decacorns. We're not looking for unicorns. And so I think how you think about market and how you're from the ground up, even just making the assessments of if you're in a big enough market, I think really explore that conversation. And something we also really focus on, but we're enterprise and deep tech and all about that commercialization of that technology, which sometimes never happens, is a lot about, product ROI and can you quantify that? So I'll pause there.
Has anyone seen a decacorn yet? Do we know what shape that will take from a figure? I haven't seen any good drawings, but I feel like unicorns are a dime a dozen these days. So decacorn is going to take over, but I wonder what the animal looks like.
I don't think we've seen a decacorn in Denver yet. So I'll let you know what it looks like when we see it, Jaclyn.
One example would be Ginkgo Bioworks, and I think they're from Boston, but to be fair, I think they had $75 million in revenue when they had that exit. It was a SPAC. So, that's a bad example in the sense that is that foundational value that was built. But we'll have to.
I was more just like actually joking, and I'm looking for like, what does the picture look like? So I'm going to look up decacorn and see if there's an illustration of it.
Wasn't there somebody wrote something recently that like something beyond the unicorn is called something else now, called like the Megazord or something? I don't know.
But I think Kira, that's a really good point, and something that.
Oh wow, guys, check! I'll put a note in.
Please share.
Pretty intense looking.
And I think important to this ecosystem is just the role models that have emerged, right, from some of these companies that have really exploded and are on their way to being decacorns, and providing that role model for the up and coming entrepreneurs of like what thinking big really looks like, right, and how that can work in this market.
Yeah, one thing I think is this is the thing I always say, like, don't sell too much of your company before you know what you have. And knowing exactly, I think Carrie, you said like pouring gasoline on it, like knowing what you would do with the capital and sort of having line of sight to what the company looks like, once you've raised that, was really important. My husband and his family built a company called Fair Harbor that was here in Denver, and had a great exit, but we didn't raise venture capital, which meant that a great exit didn't have to be a decacorn. And so another thing I think founders should really think about is knowing if you want to get on the VC path or not. And y'all should read lots of articles and tweets by Eric Paley over at Founder Collective, one of our partner funds, about the dangers of raising venture capital and especially from the wrong types of partners. And so I think being really thoughtful about what journey you want to be on as a founder, and how meaningful it is to own 100% or even 70% of something at exit versus working your ass off to build the decacorn when you own 5% at the exit, and thinking about just what that journey looks like. So I think, I guess that's what I would say, thinking about when to raise, and then it's specifically like who to raise from. There's great angels here. There's now tons of operators and exited companies. So I think angels who have also been operators that can actually be helpful are folks that you should go to. And more tactically speaking, like talk to other founders who have just raised a seed round or a pre-seed round. It's no longer a competitive issue because they raised their round. So they might be really willing to sort of tell their lead investor or some of their investors about you. And so I think the best way to do it is, do the give first thing, but like be part of the startup community here, and talk to other founders about who they've raised from. Specific names other than Range, Matchstick Ventures, Hannah Gray is here. Moxie, which is was a Bay Area fund and still sort of is, but is actually based here in Boulder these days, is another great seed fund. Kickstart Seed, who I think is one of the sponsors here. So there's lots of funds that are pretty focused on this region, especially at the early stages.
Yeah, I always think of it like, as soon as you raise, like we tell our founders, like we have, again, at Drive, we kind of like take an interesting approach where we treat people like adults. and what we say to them is like, we have expectations. Like if you're taking money from Drive, we're expecting that we're on the same path. And that path means that you're going to go hard, right? I mean, we're kind of going for building these market defining companies, whatever you want to call them, right? And so just know that when you get on that VC path, that's most likely what your investors are looking for. And they're kind of thinking about the world in terms of like, how can I build a monopoly with this company? And it doesn't mean that that's a bad thing or a good thing. It just means that like there's an expectation setting and like a level set of making sure that like when you take money from an institutional investor that you're on the same page. And when you should raise money is always a good question, simply because you have to flip that bit, right? You have to make that switch. You have to mentally say, okay, now I'm ready to get on that train, whenever that is. And that could be for the seed round, that could be for Series B. There's a great example of, we led an investment in a company in Minneapolis, a guy named Mitch Kupit. He started Code 42. He bootstrapped Code 42 to almost $100 million in revenue before he took his Series A from Excel, right? And so like at that point, that's when he was ready to flip. It just depends on what you want to go build, and whatever you do, make sure that you raise enough money from that first round of capital to be able to get you to the milestones that you're going to be able to hit to get to that next round of capital. Because once you get on the treadmill, that's what you're on, right? And so it becomes really expectation setting as to making sure that you raise enough when you do. It's very expensive money. I mean, venture dollars are very expensive. And so just make sure you use them wisely.
So one question from the audience, then I've got a final one. How important is the positive impact to the VC ecosystem in Colorado? And can you recommend any really motivated impact investors here? So anything come to mind? Otherwise I can take some of that too.
I know Techstars has that sustainability accelerator. That's the one that first comes to mind. And as for, I don't know if I have a perspective on that yet here locally. personally, I try and find that sweet spot for our firm where the financial returns are the same, and that often comes through synthetic biology and dairy cheese in a lab, or like AMP robotics to me is a perfect example. I wish I was in that company, using computer vision to sort recycling. But Adam, I'll let you better answer that.
Uncharted is one, Adam. I'm sure you have the list in front of you. Uncharted, which I think started out as Unreasonable Institute.
Oh, Uncharted. Yeah.
I think across the board, if you just think about ethos and values, I think that the average investor here cares about that positive impact while not being impact investors. So at least when I do my write-ups for deals that I want to do, there's the question of does this make people's lives better? Or what's our impact here? We're a B Corp. So I think it's probably woven into just the value set, and just that things that are going to be game changing for the world and have big outcomes tend to also probably have a big impact. So not a very specific answer, but I do think that there's a lot of investors here that care. And I think that climate's going to be a big focus for this market, given how susceptible we are to challenges around water and heat and fires. So
two other funds. So there's a new early stage impact fund called Avesta. And then Colorado Impact Fund has been around for a while, focused on impact stuff across different verticals. And then Techstars has got this sustainability program. So that's what comes to mind. There's some family offices that like impact here too. And again, I think to Jaclyn's point, all of us investing in the local ecosystem care about this. And so even if we're not an impact fund explicitly, we like to see those type of companies succeed. And a follow-up to that was, did investors see a B Corp interest as a potential negative flag? They won't go for maximizing financial returns? I think unequivocally no. To that one, I think that's just company dependent. And talking to the founders, I think it's great to you see a lot of really big, successful B Corps that are out there. So that's, if anything, all things being equal, that's a great thing. One last question for each of you, and then just would love to wrap up. Somebody asked the question how they can get in touch with us. But if each of you could say, what's one company in this ecosystem, early stage, you're excited about, not a portfolio company, can't let you off the hook that easily. One company in Denver Boulder ecosystem that you're excited about that you're not an investor in.
I'm sort of cheating because we're an indirect investor through partner funds, but Adam, I know this is one of yours. Suna is a favorite, and I think Liz Georgie is a fantastic founder, and I'm thrilled to have her in this ecosystem.
I really like Jack from Side Robotics. I think they just raised a Series A, but it's just really cool. It's the intersection of commercial landscaping with compute and robotics and AI and sensing. And I think they have a really cool Trojan horse data strategy with their go-to-market, where they can capture a ton of data with this initial use case and really build out from there and be a lot more automated.
And for me, I'm super bummed because I was trying to get my my partnership over the line on this and came up a little short. But Accept, I don't know if you know the Accept guy. I think that's
another range company. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it.
Oh, really? Are they a range company? I didn't know that.
I think.
Oh, that's right. You introduced me. That's right. You introduced me. Yeah. Those guys are amazing. I had the best time with that was just so much fun. Those guys are amazing. So
cool. And I'll give Jaclyn the shout out on this one. I like Melanie and Speckett a lot. Wish we were around as a fund back when they were raising and doing their thing, but she's great, and think what they're building is very cool. So anyone can just say how someone can get in touch with them. Somebody asked if you'd like to meet one of you during Startup Week, how can I best reach out? I'm Adam at range.vc. If you want to reach out.
Yeah, I'm Andy at Drive Capital.
I'm Kira at bpartners.vc.
I don't have email. I'm just kidding. I wish I
I don't want to put you on the spot. You got a Twitter handle.
I have two small children. No, I'm Jaclyn at foundrygroup.com. It is very easy to find me. I'm Jay Freester on Twitter as well, and I am a little bit behind in my inbox, so bear with me, but I'll try to be responsive.
Well, thank you, everybody. Really, really appreciate it. This was a lot of fun, and excited for what the next few years are going to bring for this ecosystem. Thanks y'all for attending.
Thanks, Adam.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Adam.
Adam.
Bye, guys.